Hi, I am Ifat Farhana. I am a PhD student at North Carolina State University, and today I am going to present my paper titled Investigating Relations Between Self-Regulated Reading Behaviors and Science Question Difficulty. So I want to give some context of the problem and the motivation. So middle school students of the US have the lower reading skills, and even when compared to the students of the other countries, US students have the lower reading comprehension abilities. So there is a need for the reading intervention. The scope of our study is the context of the question answering. As reading is a self-regulated activity, we try to assess that how students change their reading and self-regulated learning behaviors when they face with different level of question difficulties. So we answered two research questions. The first research question will assess the students' performance and will assess the question difficulty from the student performance. In the second research question, we will assess how the students' reading and SRL strategies vary with the question difficulties. So as a background, I will define that what is this SRL behaviors. So SRL has some steps, that is planning, monitoring, and evaluation process. An example of SRL behavior is the reading. A self-regulated reader has a goal in their mind. They can read for the just for the entertainment, or they can read for the knowledge acquisition, or they can read for the question answering. So depending on their purpose, they can choose to read or skim or reread a text. And so for the science reading requires the SRL skill, because science students need to learn concept including from the text, diagrams, and terminologies. And so we hypothesize that for the for so in the question answering context, first student see the questions, and then they will decide how they will change their reading and SRL activities. So in our context, we are considering reading and SRL activities within the classroom level context. So our data comes from a digital reading platform named Actively Learn. So Actively Learn is a K-12 reading platform, and there are two types of questions. One is free text questions and one is multiple choice questions. And all the questions have the scores within a from 0 to 4 grade. And there are several reading support features for the students, such as vocabulary lookup, annotating, highlighting, and text-to-speech feature. So here are some snapshots, because here is the how students can add the notes as they continue their reading, and here is that they can look up for any meaning that they came when they're reading, and here they can highlight a text for the portion of the reading. So as we recap for the scope of the current study, so we assess the question difficulty from the student log trace data, and we compare our proposed method with the item response theory, and we consider the SRL behavior from the actively learned reading features. So we consider the previous literature to identify the SRL behaviors. So these are the highlighting, annotating, and vocabulary lookup behaviors. So for as the dataset preparation step, we consider those questions of which has been used by at least two classes, because we are considering to assess the difficulty level across the classes. So we focus those questions of which has been used by at least two classes. So to measure the question difficulty across classes, we consider both the students' score and the number of attempts. So in this equation, we measured the students' performance of the question, and we have normalized it so it is within the 0 and 1 range. And a class's performance on the question is measured by the equation DL, and DL is ranges within the 0 and 1. 0 means that it is an easy, and 1 means it is the hard question. And it is the class level performance on the question. And then we defined another measure, that is difficulty ratio, which measured that how a question was assessed difficulty level across the classes. So this is the difficulty ratio we'll use to categorize our question. So based on the difficulty ratio, we categorize our question into easy, medium, and hard question difficulty. And we also compare our model with the IRT method. So in the IRT method, in the one parameter model, it estimates the student have the at least 50% chance to get the question correct. So we discretize our students' performance data into 0 and 1. And then we plot the curves for the easy, medium, and hard questions. So these are the results for the histograms of the student performance. So as you can see, the x-axis represents the performance of the questions and the y-axis represents the count of the students. And we can see that in the easy question, most of the students have performed very well compared to the hard questions. And now we'll analyze how our proposed method is compared to the IRT approach. So in the IRT curve, the y-axis represents the probability of the student to getting an answer correct, and the x-axis represents the average ability for the required to getting the answer correct. So we can see that for the easy question, most of the questions required average or the below average abilities. And for the medium question, we can see that the curves are slightly moved towards the right of the zero axis. That means it requires the average or above average ability. And for the hard questions, it requires most of the questions require the above average abilities. So here are the combined plots of the IRT curves. So from this curves, we can conclude that our categorization of the question is consistent with the IRT analysis, which is considered as a gold standard for the question difficulty measure. And in the second RQ, we try to assess that how these students' reading and SRL behaviors are changed within the question difficulty. So first, we define this session from the student logs, because actively learned platform does not capture the student session. So we adopted a data-driven approach from the previous literature. So we plotted the histogram of consecutive actions and identified the session as a 30 minutes duration. And we computed the reading and SRL activities prior and after the question attempt. So from the Kruskal-Wallis results, we found that the mean and SRL features of the varied across significant level for the easy, medium, and hard questions. Now we have plotted the histograms for the reading of this mean value. As we can see that hard questions required more reading compared to the easy and medium questions. And this is obvious because if a question is hard, the students may need more reading. And for the SRL activities, we can see some opposite trend. That means that easy questions required more SRL behaviors than the hard. So we try to understand why this happened, and we conclude that probably that easy question or 75 out of 80 question was a short question, and that could be a reason for the more SRL activities. And for the post-hoc down test, we also find that the reading had a statistical significant level differed for the all three pairs. And for the SRLs, we again find that not all pairs showed the statistical significant difference, but the easy and hard pairs that showed the most statistical significant difference for the pair. And for the both in the reading and the SRL pairs, we can see that the easy hard pair there's showed the most difference within. So in conclusion, we can say that our class level question difficulty result align with the IRT analysis, and easy questions require the more SRL behaviors. So we concluded that it could be due to the nature of the questions, because in the previous studies showed that essays prompt the more SRL behaviors. And for the hard questions, we examined the nature of the questions and we found that MCQ with select all that apply had was found hard by all the classes. That means that although in MCQ questions, the students can rule out one or more distractors, but for the if the question has that select all that apply, then it could be found hard by the all the questions. And for the easy hard pair, showed the most difference in SRL and reading behaviors. And for the future work, we will examine that for because we'll examine the text readability to assess the question difficulty, because it could happen that students will find the question difficult because the text is difficult to read and comprehend, and we have not assessed this in our study. So this is for the study. This is comprehension, and thank you. And I I'll be happy to have any questions.